All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our VantagePoint AI live session today, right here on our YouTube channel. So glad to have every one of you joining us today. Looks like we've got a lot of attendees, so very excited to dive into what I feel like is a very kind of a hot topic. We've got some hot stocks moving here recently in the markets. So we're going to take a deeper dive into some of those markets that have already started trending, but also too, what markets are we looking for some potential turnaround plays as well. So let's go ahead and get started here. I am going to pull over my VantagePoint screen. So let's go ahead and get that pulled up together. All right, everybody should be seeing my screen. And before we get too far into the charts, if you can just do me a big favor and let me know that you can hear me loud and clear. I'm going to be checking our chat throughout the session today, so just want to make sure that all can hear me and that we're good to go. All right. Perfect. So we're going to dive on into a few assets that have really been on the move lately here. And thank you everybody for your comments and engagement during the session. Before we get into anything kind of educational here, I do want to just make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm not a licensed advisor, but I am here to provide as much education as possible as our VantagePoint University head trainer. That's what I'm here for all day and every day. And I like to pass along that knowledge as much as possible. So I certainly do hope that whether you're using the VantagePoint software or maybe this is your first time seeing it, that you'll come away from this session with a few golden nuggets that you can take back and put some practical application to hopefully help you on your way to success in the markets. So keep in mind, even if you're not using the VantagePoint software, we're here to provide education here on our live session. So looking forward to diving into this live analysis. Do me a favor though, if you are not using the VantagePoint software yet, just go ahead and let me know so I know what level of traders we have in the session today. That'll be incredibly helpful for me just to make sure that I provide information that's going to help everyone in the session today. So go ahead and type those into the chat, maybe just new, or drop in your name in the chat as well. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that for sure. All right, so let's get to the fun stuff. For those of you who are not familiar with the VantagePoint software, I'll go through a brief run through just on how to use VantagePoint. And I tell you, it's pretty simple. For our family members who are in the session today, you guys are already probably looking at this, knowing exactly where you would have seen the potential for an uptrend here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my crosshairs right here on the blue line, crossing over the black line where our trend here turns green. We like to think green for bullish, and so that's kind of green is everybody's favorite color when it comes to the markets. And so when we have our blue line crossing over the black line here and the trend turning green, that is really the first piece of confirmation that you need to signal the start of a potentially bullish trend. And so here we have our first point of confirmation, and that's our trend identifier. This is actually a predictive moving average. So this is one of our proprietary indicators that actually look forward to help you better understand what to expect in the markets ahead of time. Now, the next piece here, and let me grab my pen because it'll be a lot easier if I am able to actually show you and pinpoint exactly where we're looking. So if you notice here, we have our neural index, and our neural index here is in fact green, which is the price action or the expected movement of price over the next 2 days. So yes, this looks out 2 days into the price movement, and we can see, in fact, price went higher over the next 2 days. We get higher highs both over the next 2 days there. So helping to confirm that trend as well. So when we see the trend along with price, then we have 2 points of confirmation. And really, we're looking to stack the odds. That's always the game in trading, right? Is stacking the odds in your favor. Thanks, Carl. I'm so glad to have you in today. Absolutely. And then, of course, we come down to our next piece of confirmation. And you're going to hear me say confirmation a lot today. Get used to that word because confirmation equals confidence, and we certainly want you to have confidence in your trading selections. So if you come down to your predictive differences, think of these as a measure of strength within the trend. So if we have the start of a new trend and we have price action also confirming that expected movement, well, we want to know that there's strength backing that trend as well. And that's where those predictive differences come in. So with our predictive differences, we can see that we have bullish strength coming in. Why do I say that? Well, because they're all moving up. Right? With that upward trajectory of that strength, we know that this trend is sort of stepping on the accelerator, if you will. And look what happens here. I mean, we can see it for ourselves. We see this trend continuing on up bullishly and continuing that movement all the way through until we get to current day. So current day, here we now have a continued bullish trend. Now, Hood is one of those markets that's just been on a major run here recently. So this has been one of those areas of growth within the markets, whether it's technology or the consumer sector or semiconductors, right? Areas of the market that have movement coming in are always good, areas to follow as well. So we can take a look at some of those other assets. Do we have any questions so far on how to utilize the predictive indicators thus far? We've looked at 3. There are 4, and we're going to get to that here in just a moment with our predictive trade candle, but want to make sure everybody's on the same page with me. I don't want to leave anybody behind. I can tend to run through these a little bit fast. So kind of give me some feedback in the chat here if you are ready to look at our next chart. So let's go ahead and jump on into IBM. Now, IBM, again, another asset that's just been on an incredible move here recently. And this is another view here in your VantagePoint. In VantagePoint, you can customize several different views for your particular trade setup or strategies. That's a beautiful thing about artificial intelligence, is that we can use the technology and the artificial intelligence, but don't forget about that human component. That human component is you. What is your personal trade preferences? What are your trade strategies? What are your risk tolerances? Those are all things you have to take into account when you're looking for opportunities and finding those ideal opportunities for you. So if you like large movers, right, which I know most of you do, right, then of course we've got a couple of assets to take a look at here today. So excited to keep on looking through these as well. So let's not forget that those points of confirmation are incredibly important, looking back at the trend to identify where VantagePoint forecasted this trend to begin. Because if you can get in even just a couple of days earlier, it makes the world of difference. Or if you could get out a couple of days earlier, it makes the world of difference. Or better yet, if you could better manage your position, those types of small adjustments in a trade strategy, because you have better, more powerful information, is really what takes your trading to the next level. So looking at some of these game-changing indicators, we can see here on our triple cross, we do have a bullish expectation. Now, the triple cross here, for those of you who are not familiar, is a little different than just a simple crossover, right? The triple cross actually has 3 predictive moving averages on the screen at the same time, and it really helps to evaluate the integrity of a trend. And so for this indication, you can use this also in a position management scenario as well. So maybe you chose to enter into, and again, this is just a hypothetical example here, looking back at this trend, we can see, I'm going to switch back to that crossover view where we have our predictive moving average crossing over our actual moving average. So we actually have our crossover confirming back here with our neural index and our predictive differences coming up. Now, you may have chosen to wait just a little bit until you got full confirmation from your predictive differences and the neural index, as well as your crossover as well. Again, that's the beautiful thing about VantagePoint, is if you're not comfortable at the start, there's always plenty of opportunities. Just watch for the predictive analysis and wait for those predictive signals so you can make that decision with confidence as well. So at this point, we do have that confirmation, and then managing that position moving forward, you may choose to switch to a bit more of a conservative indication like the triple cross here. So we can see full confirmation of our bullish trend with growing integrity. Now, let's talk about that for a second, because an established trend will behave slightly different than a new trend that's just starting out. It has a little bit more stability within it, or integrity, if you will. And that's where the triple cross comes in. So using the triple cross as position management can be incredibly helpful to better managing those positions along the way, so you're not kind of getting emotional or scared or fearful at every bump and dip and turn of the market. So let's walk through this indicator as well. We can see that once our triple cross turns green here, this is going to give us a really strong bullish signal coming up through this trend, meaning our trend really has some good bullish integrity. Now, we do experience a little bit of weakness, and that's okay. Our neural index gave us a heads up of that, right? So we also want to use our other indicators to look for some potential weakness, where maybe should you be cautious but not fearful. And that's the difference between just overreacting because of emotion and trading strategically and proactively because you have the advanced notification from the indicator. So nothing really catches you off guard. We don't like to be caught off guard, right? As humans, unless you like surprises. Good surprises, those are fun. Bad surprises in the market, not so much, right? So if we see our bit of weakness here, but notice our triple cross remains green. It remains bullish. And so we had confidence to kind of work through that little bit of weakness coming up through the remainder of this trend. Now, if you are a shorter term swing trader, and that's really what VantagePoint is designed for, is that short term swing, then you may have chosen to potentially even exit out at this point, where we do have, I'll switch over to a crossover, where we do have a crossover to the downside. So we can see that this trend really does weaken. We have a cross to the downside. Our neural index is bearish, and the predictive differences are all headed on their way down. So if you maybe chose to exit at that point, we have from crossover to crossover here. I'm just going to make this really easy, guys, and just do a quick crossover to crossover. You still have almost 11% gain, depending upon where you got in and where you got out, that 10.5 to 11%. That's a huge gain in just a couple of weeks. And so looking then, if you chose to enter and exit, you've already realized some gain there. But the question then is there more left in here? And so if we switch back to that triple cross view, now you guys are starting to get a sense of how to strategize using these various timeframes, or maybe just utilizing one depending upon who you are as a trader. But that's why we have our wonderful training here at VantagePoint University, is to really, help you find out who you are as a trader. We certainly aren't here to give trading advice, but to help you better understand how to use the indicators for your specific strategies is what we're here for. So hopefully passing a little bit of that along today. Now, if we look at that crossover here, where we had that bearish movement from our shorter term indication, now switching back over to our longer term indicator, the triple cross, how do we know when this trend might continue its bullish movement or have some renewed bullish strength coming into the trend? And well, we can see this darker blue line that runs along the bottom of the screen. That darker blue line is the T-cross long. Got a little tongue-tied there, so it happens. But you can see that T-cross long level holds very, very strong in an uptrend. All right, so what that does is actually provides a very dynamic level of support and resistance. So Now, we're not only analyzing the trend expectation, the price expectation, the strength expectation, but now you have dynamic support and resistance. That is information that every trader really should have in order to not trade blindly in the markets and just kind of hope and pray for the best, because hope is not necessarily a strategy. You want to make sure that you can look at a chart and trade with confidence. And that's right here what we see with our trend holding strong above that T cross long level here. If we notice, price never breaks above that breaks below that T cross long. It never does, right? It holds strong. So let me zoom on in just a little closer so you guys can see. In fact, on this day, this consolidation candle that we have here on 523, if you notice, that low really tries very hard to break below that T cross long, but we don't. We come back and we bounce up above that level again, telling us that we're really at a very strong support point here in the trend. So with support pushing up on that trend, we try again here and no go, right? And then again here and nothing. Now, when we touch that T cross long and start to see renewed bullish strength coming in. Now, let me remind you of our strength indicators, guys, right? Those strength indicators down here are those predictive differences. That's what we call them here in VantagePoint. They are predictive indicators as well that do help you to better understand the strength of a trend. So when we're at a support point and we see renewed bullish strength coming in, the likelihood of this trend continuing to the bullish side then increases exponentially. So stacking the odds in your favor of a bullish expectation rather than a bearish expectation. If you had exited out over here, that's okay. You just saved yourself some sideways movement, right? Or some marginal movement here during that week and re-entry possibly, again, the hypothetical scenario, but looking at our signals for a bullish trend expectation right here on 6-2 with that renewed bullish strength. So you're not missing out on another very large piece of that trend. Let's just take a look here very quickly. I'm curious to see if we're looking at that retracement here, right? Because we look at key levels to better understand. Oops, there we go. Profit calc, that's what I wanted, properties. All right, so now we're at 13.14%, give or take, of course, a bit for where you entered and where you exited. But overall, with those two trends, the other one was anywhere from 10.5 to 11. So let's call it 10 for easy math and say anywhere from 23 to 24% in two moves. That's not too bad for a nice growth opportunity that was identified in VantagePoint ahead of time, helping you navigate through those trends. Or maybe you just stayed in that entire time because of the triple cross. Every trader is going to look at that a little differently, and that's okay. The point is, VantagePoint navigated you through those scenarios confidently so you could make the best trade decision for you. So let's go ahead and dive on into another. And I tell you what, I always like to give a heads up of this. Towards the end of our session today, I am going to be asking for some ticker symbols. Don't type those in now. All right, but I want you guys to start thinking about some ticker symbols because we are going to do some live analysis on ticker symbols that you guys want to look at as well. So if there's anything specific you guys want to take a look at, we can certainly go ahead and pull those up. I'll go through as many as I possibly can. But of course, today is our focus on the big movers and where their expectation is in the future. So let's take a look at IBM. So we can see our predictive trade candle. That's that fourth point of confirmation that I wanted to touch on today. That fourth point of confirmation, that predictive trading range, if you will. That predictive trading range is going to give you the expected predicted high and the expected predicted low for that market. Now, of course, we're in currently a bullish trend with IBM, so we can see we do still have bullish strength within the trend. However, we do see some potential weakness in the price for today. Now, I want to also point out down here on our neural index that we are still very bullish on the neural index. So the 2-day price expectancy still bullish. That's important to note. So you may have a bit of, caution here because of the predictive trade candle. And this is where the predictive trade candle, if you zoom on in, you may choose to use this to maybe even set some stops, or use these predictive levels to take the guesswork out of setting those stops. If you know that the predictive high is expected to be 294.24 and the predicted low 288.43, you can see as I hover over, there's a pop-up window that will show you exactly what those predictive values are. We'll even give you the midpoint of that predictive range, which in this case was 291.34. So everybody just give me a thumbs up if you guys are seeing the pop-up there, because I want to make sure that everybody can see that very clearly also. So with that predictive information, of course, we do have some options information in there as well for you options traders. So there are, of course, additional indicators that are optional that we do have here in VantagePoint to make it even more powerful. But, that's technology, right? Always innovating. So as we take a look at that predicted high and predicted low, you may, with a bit of caution for today, because of that predictive trade range being red on top and red on the bottom. And guys, what that means is that we simply have a lower high expected and a lower low expected. So some bearishness on both points of that predictive trade candle. You may set your stop loss a comfortable distance from that predictive trade range to protect yourself, to provide yourself that safety net, if you will, to make sure that in case things do go against you, that you've protected profits, you've protected yourself from some major emotional heartache. All right, so you can trade based strategically on what you see rather than, just letting it ride and hoping for the best. All right, so let's see. Hi, Joanne. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We can certainly take a look at that as well. Thank you for that suggestion. All right. So where was IBM today? I think we were right around 291 where we ended and IBM today. So we were at right there around that predictive mid-range right there. So maybe a slightly higher than that on where we ended for the day, and the day's range was 290 to 270. I just went ahead and pulled that up for us, guys. So we can see that we were well within that predictive trade range, staying above that predictive low. If you had your stop loss in, great, you protected yourself. You weren't worried about that position today, and you are still bullish on that expectation here. So tonight when the software updates, keep in mind the software updates every night at 6:30. So you get these forecasts the day before. This information that we're looking at, we actually got that last night, which is really, really exciting when you think about getting kind of tomorrow's news today. I want to know what to expect. I want to know what's around some of those blind corners. So that way nothing is really all that surprising. You can strategize around any areas of increased risk, similar to the predictive trade candle, so you can make sure you're protecting yourself and also maximizing those trends as well. So let's take a look at some others here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up CrowdStrike. This is another one that I in my trainings, and I do one-on-one trainings with a lot of our VantagePoint family members, and in some of those trainings, this is one that everyone has been talking about. So I thought, if my family members that we're talking about these in our one-on-one sessions, then others probably have some questions on this as well. And CrowdStrike has been one of those big movers all year long, not just recently, but we've had some really significant movement in CrowdStrike, whether to the upside or to the downside. So I'm actually going to back this out about 6 months because we had a really, really nice move coming into January, right? And again, now you know the predictive indicators here in VantagePoint, so you can see that we did have that bullish movement and expectation coming in January, staying really tried and true again above that T-cross long level all the way up until we really start to see some significant downturn here on 220, right, where we do get a crossover, and I'll just show you guys here so you can see VantagePoint forecasted this major downturn much earlier. We actually have that crossover on 219 with the predictive neural index bearish and our predictive differences moving down as well. So with that, Guys, if you're bullish, this is where you say, okay, I think about exiting, maybe, depending upon what your risk tolerances are. What do you decide to do here? Maybe you turn around and short the market, take a short position here if you're an options trader. It works very well to the upside or to the downside. We're just looking for confirmation inversely. So we want all red instead of all green for that total confirmation here. So where do we see additional movement then if we come back over to our triple cross, because we had a big run up here and then a big correction back to the downside, some areas of consolidation here where we do have some shorter term moves where you can take advantage of that. So again, I'm going to switch back over to the medium term crossover so you can identify where there are some areas, even if you're a shorter term trader, there are other areas where we do have confirmation here. All three predictive differences moving up. Neural index is green. Bullish crossover, guys, right here to the upside. There's some really short moves that you could have taken advantage of as well. But if you're already in that position, managing that or looking for larger moves ahead of time can be a really, really huge asset when it comes to looking at these markets. Selecting kind of what markets are expected to move next is probably the hardest thing about trading. So you don't have to do that alone. Use the predictive data, use the artificial intelligence. You can even use what we call IntelliScan. So for all of my VantagePoint family members, kind of tell me, how are you using your IntelliScan right now? Are you looking for bullish trends, bearish trends? What opportunities have you seen recently come up in IntelliScan that have turned out really well for you? So let's take a look. I'm actually going to pull on our electronic market accumulation index. Who is familiar with the electronic market accumulation? Or let me just ask this: who's familiar with Larry Williams? Right, Larry Williams is one of the most well-known traders in the world. And he has developed many indicators over his days. Several of those are exclusive to VantagePoint. And the electronic market accumulation index, yes, that's a mouthful, so I'm just going to call it our EMAI line, is one of those. And what this does is it tracks the accumulation and distribution of assets by the major institutions. And this right here is paramount to understanding when big moves are coming up. Because in order for a larger market movement to happen, we usually need to see institutional money coming in. We need to see those big players in the market, the professional money coming into that trend and really backing it in a big way. And so the accumulation index, or EMAI for short, helps you understand when that money flow is coming in. So that's our blue line that we see here. All right, it looks a little choppy, and that's okay. That's how it's built. You're looking at the overall trend. And so when we see the overall trend coming off of a low and shooting up like this, that tells us that institutions are really in a phase of accumulation. Accumulation meaning buying. All right, so when they're accumulating an asset, that's typically going to then have an impact on price. All right, now this is sort of a setup for future conditions. And so under bullish conditions, then once we get our crossover and strong movement from our predictive timing indicators, you can then line up your institutional movement with the timing from the predictive indicators for the trend, and have a really nice kind of happy marriage between two very different components that work very well together to give you even more confidence in a larger trend expectation. So with institutional movement coming in, and then with your crossover and confirmation from your predictive indicators in VantagePoint, we have a lot of confidence on this larger trend expectation coming up. And so not only are we looking at that predictive data, but we're also looking at additional components such as the accumulation. You could also look at seasonality here as well. There's many different components that you could look at from that standpoint. Yes, and guys, for those of you who do need more information on VantagePoint, maybe you're just not familiar with it yet, or this is the first time you're seeing it, go to VantagePointForecast.com. I know that we've dropped it in the chat already, and we'll do so again if we need to. So please let us know. Just let us know, because we certainly want to help you, and if you need more information, we're here to provide that. So don't forget also to, while I'm asking, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel as well. We do trainings here a couple times a week, so there's always great information and education happening here on our VantagePoint AI live channel. So welcome you back to any future training sessions moving forward. And of course, it's always a delight to have you guys here with us as well. So let's take a look then at another market that's really had some significant growth here recently, and that would be Netflix, right? And with things like Netflix, right? This is an asset that's just been moving significantly. So some of you might be trading options on this. Let me ask, how many of you are trading options? Let me ask that question. Because, options traders just tend to look at a trend maybe a little differently, still looking at the underlying asset as well. But, in an asset that has a fairly hefty price tag, we'll put it that way, when it comes to price per share, options might be an area that will allow you to get into some of these assets without having to shell out, $1,200 per share. So yes, the indicators are 1, 2, and 3 days in advance. Remember, we've talked about some of those custom timeframes as well. And so I'll just go ahead and click that view drop down. That's going to allow you to view the charts on several different timeframes. So the short-term crossover, which we've looked at several times, that's our most sensitive indication. That's going to be a 1-day trend forecast, looking out for the next trade day to tell you whether or not we expect that trend to continue bullish or bearish. So if you like really short-term swings, or even some day traders will use that short-term crossover as well. Now looking at the medium-term crossover, that's a 2-day trend forecast, and I'll just flip on over to that medium-term crossover for you as well. You can see that's a bit smoother as well. That's a 2-day trend forecast. The long-term crossover, gonna smooth that out even further. That's a 3-day trend forecast. And then our triple cross actually uses 3 predictive moving averages to give you more so the integrity. This is going to be your most conservative view. But again, to answer that question, 1, 2, and 3 days, just depending upon your preferences and what view you're looking at. So if we take a look at Netflix, now, how has Netflix been performing, right? Well, we can see from the bullish trend that Netflix has been performing incredibly well here recently. But over the year, how has Netflix really done in comparison to other assets, or maybe even the major indices? And that's where you can, in fact, we have what we call the 52-week index compare. And I'll just show you here that compared to the major indices, and that's exactly what this indicator does right here, is it looks at that 52-week index average and compares the indexes to this particular asset. In this case, it's Netflix, right? So when we look at Netflix's performance at 80.06% better than the indices on average over the last 52 weeks, the last year, then that also gives you a lot of confidence into where this market is headed. Now, at its worst, Netflix has only been underperforming the markets by about 10.33%, right? So let's call it 10% for easy math. And at its best, which is where we're almost at right now, it's been outperforming the markets by about 80.6%. We can see, because this is majorly green here, right? The market, this Netflix has really outperformed the major indices most of the time. So if you're looking for higher quality assets that typically outperform the markets, the 52-week index compare is a great way to very quickly, very easily compare and contrast that assessment. So you can get a better sense of, okay, well, is this market typically doing well? Is this an outlier trend? Or is this something that is very steadily outperforming the major indices? telling you that it may be of higher quality than others, right? So let's take a look too at our EMAI. We've looked at a couple of different indicators here today, but I'm going to back this up to a 6-month view just so we can see Netflix, where the electronic market accumulation, or that EMAI line, remember that's that institutional movement, was setting us up for those bullish conditions ahead of time. Look at that institutional movement coming in. That's institutional money moving into that asset here. Now, you can see that's setting us up for bullish conditions. What do you want to do with that? You want to time it with the timing indicators, or pair it up with the timing indicators, align them, stack the probabilities. However, you want to break it down. Basically, you want things in agreement. All right. Things in agreement tend to move much more smoothly, right? Just ask your spouse. But if you see, we have that crossover right here happening, and this is the triple cross. So I was looking for some trend integrity here, but even if we switch back to our medium-term crossover, we had that medium-term crossover right here with that clear crossover, predictive differences moving up, and our neural index green, all in alignment right here, giving us that timing under bullish institutional conditions, telling us big money moving in, and the trend is starting to move. So you've got really good timing with a lot of confidence with that trend being backed by the institutions. And by the way, a market that typically outperforms the major indices. So with all of that being said, hopefully you'd have a little bit more confidence there. But finding good quality opportunities like that, the index compare is a great way to do that. In fact, that's a key assessment in professional traders. So they will compare a market's performance, right? And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. How is this market performing compared to what? It's usually the major indices. How do you do that? Well, there you go. The 52-week index compare. Done for you, right? So, of course, now we see the institutions possibly pulling out of this market. Well, not possibly, right? We do see the institutional movement coming down, setting us up for potentially bearish conditions. Now, we don't have that timing just yet, guys. All right. Now, remember what I said. You need the institutions with timing, because just because we're under bearish conditions doesn't necessarily mean that it's time to move there just yet. So, of course, we would wait for that timing indication. You can see we're still in a very strong bullish trend, right? So again, this is just where you could look for some potential caution here coming up as we've had this very strong run. Although let me put a caveat on this, right? We're still bullish, right? So are we sort of cautiously bullish as we approach new highs? Absolutely. That should always be the case though, as we approach new highs. Are you scared of them? No, because you have the predictive technical analysis here in VantagePoint that will help you forecast that reversal ahead of time. So you watch the predictive analysis, you watch the predictive indicators, and wait for those signals so you don't have to trade based off of fear or emotion. All right. Tends to make for some pretty bad trading decisions. So let the technical analysis guide you. Let the predictive indicators guide you here rather than your emotions. So let's jump on in. We'll take a look at one more here. I'm going to look at MU, and we can see we've got our EMAI line already on that line there on MU, or on that chart here. So as we see, we do have the EMAI, or the institutional movement, coming on in. Again, backed by that trend, the predictive differences are coming up, and our neural index is bullish. For those of you who want to see that shorter term crossover, I'm going to switch over to the medium term so you can see exactly where we had that crossover along with those predictive differences right there. All right. So timing backed by institutional movement can lead to some very strong moves that have the potential to grow over time, because they do have that money moving into the market. Now, let's take a look at some additional trends that are really just starting out, because part of this session was also looking for turnarounds as well. One, how do we identify those stronger trends ahead of time, and then how to look for them moving forward? Because, there's always plenty of opportunities in the market. Just because the market has already started moving bullishly doesn't mean that you can't enter in, at a retracement period. Just depending upon what your strategy is going to depend upon what you're comfortable doing in the markets. but do it with confidence. Do it with data backing your decisions as well. So now that you know what to look for, let's take a look at some potential turnarounds or potential reversals coming into the software. So we can scan for these. We do have a scanner in the software. It's called IntelliScan. And I saw most of your responses were that you were looking for bullish trends here recently. So thank you for those of you who did put in your responses about the IntelliScan. So if we were looking for our indicators all moving to the upside, and I'll just pull up a quick IntelliScan so you guys can see. We'll just select new IntelliScan. You can see we can actually sort for those markets, those indicators that we've talked about here. The indicators that are in the IntelliScan are the same indicators that are down here on the chart. So you can really sort and filter for any type of opportunity. So, using things like the crossovers, right? Those were our timing indicators. And then we have our predictive neural index for price. And then, of course, we have the predictive differences as well, those measures of strength within the trend. And then you could even filter for things like volume and close price, depending upon what your own personal preferences are. So HP was one that had come up in what we would call a reversal scan here in VantagePoint University. So this is really looking for assets that have been kind of oversold, if you will, right? Maybe pushing up against a level of support here. And if you want, you could also add your support indicator to the screen as well. So that's that big green block right here. It looks like a brick wall. And guess what, guys? That's a brick wall for price too. And we can see that price has already tried to push through that level several times here and been unable to break through that level of support. And those little arrows, those are telling you that price is being supported or pushed up by that verified support level. So when we see price overextended to the downside, meaning it's very bearish, well, we've seen that very bearish trend already take place. I'll switch on over so you guys can see that even opportunity to the downside presented itself back here, yes, before the major fall, right? So we had a crossover here, predictive differences coming down, and a red neural index. So before this big drop, before earnings, VantagePoint had already potentially secured your profits if you were looking for that. And I'll just go crossover to crossover here, right? Profit calc, and you can see 20% rather than giving it all back. That's a difference, right? We were at 20% there to possibly 6%. Who wants to give back over half of their profits, really 2/3 of their profits? Probably not a lot of you, especially if it's happened before, right? Those are the things we try to avoid. Well, do that with the predictive analysis. And better yet, if you short the market, then just take the trend to the downside here until we get that crossover. Boom, profit calc, another 15% in a couple of weeks to the downside, less premium, of course, if you're trading options as well. So we can see you've got some significant trends that have really identified themselves through the artificial intelligence, through the neural networks. That's the power here of having that confidence to ride those trends. So what are we seeing now, right? Let's go to current day because we are looking for those turnaround assets. So, well, on 625 last night, we had a bullish crossover to the upside. And in case you can't see it, I'm just going to zoom on in so everybody can get a really nice close-up view so you don't have to put on your readers. Don't worry. I'm not quite there yet. I say. All right. I say that next week you'll see me with glasses, right? But here we have that bullish crossover here where the blue line's coming above the black line. The trend has turned green. Do we have a predictive neural index that's confirming that movement? And yes, we do. And do we have our predictive differences moving to the upside as well? And the answer is yes. Those are all three moving up or at an upward trajectory, upward angle, however you want to, say that. But either way, they're giving us bullish strength, telling us that we're likely stepping on the accelerator within this trend. So if we then take a look at even our triple cross. Now, notice this is not bullish yet, all right? That's because that's not typically our first indication of the trend. When the triple cross turns green, that's typically when we see that trend really start to take off. So I'll show you that example here where we could see our predictive medium-term crossover happen back here, but it did take some time for that triple cross to confirm the integrity of the trend. Why? Well, because it's more conservative. It's going to look for stronger trend movement, and that's why it can be, useful for that position management style of trading, or potentially even once it crosses above. If you did enter into a position early and then the triple cross comes over, maybe you add to your position, right? That's part of position management as well. It's just understanding when to add to a position, when to take away from a position, even more so than just when to enter and when to exit. All right. So as we can see, we do have that medium-term crossover here, an earlier identification of that potential trend reversal. Let's look for that predictive neural index down here, and we do see that it is green. We have our predictive differences on the uptrend, giving us that nice bullish strength. And then our predictive trade candle is also confirming higher highs expected and higher lows expected. So let's just go ahead and take a look at HPQ. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up just using that little magnifying glass. And so with that, we can see that, yes, we in fact do have bullish movement. Let me just pull that on over with this ending at 24.71 today. We can see HPQ. All right. So pull that back on over. Let's take a look. So we were at 24.71, guys. We ended just above that predictive high. Oh, how wonderful it is when VantagePoint tells the markets what to do. It's just a joke, guys. Running joke here around, VantagePoint. With any VantagePoint family member, VantagePoint likes to tell the markets what to do. 87.4% of the time they follow. But that is truly the accuracy of up to 87.4% accuracy on the indications and your forecast. And that accuracy, of course, increases as the more confidence that you have as well with the more predictive indicators you layer onto your chart. So let's take a look. I know that we had a couple of ticker symbols that were requested. So I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to go back through the chart and go ahead and type those in now as well, because we do have about 10 minutes or so before the end of our session. So Joanne, thank you for that. I took note of your entry earlier, so thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pull up MicroStrategy for us. And then let's see, there was also another with AMD. All right, no problem. And then let's also look at FLS. Sorry, I'm just kind of running through our symbols here through the chat. I try to keep my eye on it. Rick, thank you. I see yours too. We'll pull up MP. Okay. Was that now MP? Is it the peso or in a currency, or are we looking at the basic materials? I'm going to assume you're referencing the equities because most do, but futures markets or currencies as well. So I'll pull up MP materials, but clarify for me if that's not the case, please. All right, I think there were a couple of duplicates in here. So I do see Rick, thank you. I see yours. All right, so let's start here, right? If there are any others, don't hesitate. Just drop them in the chat. If we can get to them before the end of the session, we will. But let's take a deeper dive on some of these assets that you guys wanted to take a look at here. So if we look at our current trend on MicroStrategy, now, of course, we've been in sort of this area of consolidation that's been happening here. And anytime you have price kind of bouncing back and forth, you can see that we've got this, what we would call a channel happening. Now, that's typically a channel of support and resistance Who's trading using support and resistance? I think I asked this on the last session, and I was surprised that there were so many traders not using verified support and resistance. And I think that whether you're using it on VantagePoint or another platform, this will definitely change your mind, because you would be able to see very clearly where that channel was occurring and why you might want to be careful throughout that channel. So I'm just going to go ahead. I've got verified support and resistance already kind of looked as a staple on my chart. So we'll just go ahead and turn those back on. Now, if you notice, we've got levels of support right here, right around 358, 359. And then we've got levels of resistance happening here right around 394. So we're in this channel of support and resistance. And this is really was established back here on the support level on 528. So we've been here for a month, guys, a month of just sideways movement. So if you like spreads or a delta neutral strategy, you're probably salivating at this opportunity right here. But if you are not trading spreads or delta neutral strategies and you want some market movement, then this is probably something that you want to avoid happening here. And so especially when we have this resistance level that we failed to break through already 3 consecutive times, guys. Now, let me point this out in case you don't see it, because this is so incredibly important. So listen up. If you've kind of, been listening at all, you know that these arrows are going to give you the direction of impact. This is, again, like running into a brick wall. I said it about support earlier, and we can see that area of support is just below. So it's this white area here that's really our channel that price is just stuck in right now. It's like a ping pong ball just bouncing back and forth between this channel here. And so we haven't been able to escape this channel. And until we do, this is where price is likely to be sort of stuck, if you will. And so up against this resistance level, since we've failed already to break this resistance level, look guys, on 6-3, we came up, touched and established that resistance level, failed to break any higher. That's a failure off of a key level. Tells us that there's some weakness in that movement. Then again, we try to retest that same level on 6-9. We fail to break that level. We again tested on 6-10. Failure here. Now, I don't know about you, but the definition of trying to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but either way, you want to be cautious, right? And so as we approach that resistance level again on MicroStrategies, you would want to be very careful, because history proves itself that this level of resistance here is very strong. All right, so whenever we're up against a really strong level of resistance, sort of that brick wall with with a proven track record of failing off of that level, you do want to exercise extreme caution. So if we hit this level as we were expecting to do today and fail off of that level, no one should have been surprised there. And that's the importance of really understanding how price reacts at these key levels. Now, I'm also going to point out something very important as well. You see that T cross long level. We've talked about it previously on that triple cross, that darker blue T cross long line. We only closed above that level one day. When you close above one day, that's your first sign. What's a verified breakout? Who can tell me in this session? For all of my VantagePoint family members, I hope that you know, but tell me, how many consecutive days do we need to verify a breakout trend? And the next question is, do we have it here? I love a pop quiz, right? So we'll test out your knowledge here today. I'll give just a few seconds as I go through the additional analysis, and then I'll give you the answer to that. But as we hit that resistance level here and that T cross long level is telling us that we are fairly heavy on resistance at that point. Let's get that pen just a little bit smaller. There we go. All right, so yes, okay, 2 consecutive closes. Thank you so much, guys, for I'm so proud. I'm like a proud teacher right now for all of my my regulars here in the session. And for those of you who again might just be new to the session and want more information on VantagePoint, VantagePointForecast.com is where you're going to go. So you too can learn kind of these rules and guidelines around the technical analysis, specifically how to use these predictive levels to help you in your own trade strategies. But yes, 2 consecutive days. So count them. We only have 1 day above that T-cross long level, which we know is a dynamic level of support or resistance from earlier. So with only 1 close above, that would not give us 2 consecutive closes. That would not signify that verified breakout of this channel, which means we're still stuck in the channel. And today's price really proves that. And MicroStrategies was down today around 386, so right down towards the predictive low here today. So still using that predictive low, but we were not able to break above that resistance level. So we hit it, came back down. So if we closed, which we did, above that T-cross long 2 consecutive days, right? We've now broken that, but we're right up against a resistance level. So with those two kind of back-to-back layering over top of each other, you do want to exercise extreme caution. Now, with that being said, if we can close above that resistance level 2 days, then you could potentially see a verified breakout trend, which could be the sign of a strong turnaround, which is what our session was about today. So thank you so much, Joanna, for bringing that to the table. All right, so let's take a look at, AMD. All right, AMD is on a bit of a run here, has been recently. So was there anything specific about AMD, or just want to run through our analysis today? Because we're still in a strong bullish trend, we can see right here. Bullish expectation, actually we've been bullish on this for quite a while. If you were looking at, I tend to go with the middle of the road here with the medium term crossover. That's the default indicator in VantagePoint, is the medium term crossover. It's sort of, not too sensitive, not too conservative, but really just right for that swing style of trading. And so with that medium term crossover, do we have our 4 points of confirmation? Let's check them together. 1, 2, and 3. Yes, we do, for that confirmation here of bullish expectation and potential entry, if that is what you are looking for. So then riding that trend all the way up, a little bit of caution here. At this point, you're either out or maybe switching over to a more conservative indication running on through that trend. So we can see we are still in bullish expectation here with nice momentum or strength pushing in as well. We do have momentum indicators, predictive momentum indicators specifically, that can also help you navigate through that support and resistance. But even just looking at the strength here in the predictive differences, we do see a lot of bullish strength here. And then also the predictive trade candle continuing in its bullish trajectory as well, with a higher high expected and a higher low. So that little magnifying glass is right here. Someone had asked just a few questions ago and I just saw it. I'm sorry. But yes, that magnifying glass is right there to look up AMD. And AMD was at 143.68. Yep. All right. Sorry. Just looking at my other screen to see where we were at for the day, but 143.68. So we ended right around that mid-range here, still within that predictive trade candle and still continuing on that bullish trajectory or expectation. So let's take a look at the next one. I'm going to look at FLS Flowserve. All right. This looks like a nice potential turnaround here, where we do see we have 2 closes above that triple cross, that T-cross long. So we do now see some additional confirmation here, not only from our medium term crossover right here back on 624, giving you that confirmation of a bullish expectation, but we also see something that's been oversold for quite some time. So let's take a look and see that 52-week index compare, see where this is. So typically outperforming the markets by about 23.81%, currently at about underperforming by about 8%. And so we do have some room for recovery here, where this market's typically an outperformer, but it looks like it's been oversold. And so with that sort of renewed bullish strength, do we have the potential to come back up and continue on in this bullish run. And so as we look at some of that strength indication as well, we could even look at things like your EMAI or momentum indicators as well to assess those trend signals and additional confirmation here. So we're right at 5 o'clock on the dot, guys. I tried to get through as many as possible. I'm going to run through MP really quickly just because that was one of the last ones that came on. And Rick, I certainly don't want to disappoint. So we'll run through this here where we can see the medium term crossover crossing back here with confirmation, right? So confirmation here from neural index, predictive differences, nice bullish trend that continued on. Now, where would we be a little bit cautious here? Well, I'm always going to say when we have a crossover, right? When we have crossovers and weakness coming from all of these, that's really where you do want to exercise really good risk management at that point. Maybe you're exiting out of a portion of the trade. Could we just be seeing a potential pullback and then a continuation? This is where your triple cross can help you. We are still bullish on the triple cross. So are we just seeing some shorter term, maybe reversion back to a mean, or potentially coming back down to touch a buy point where you're maybe even adding back into that trend as well? So all, food for thought. You have to do what's best for you as the trader. Again, I'm not a licensed advisor, but I certainly know my technical analysis. And so do what's best for you. But read the technical analysis, give yourself the best opportunity, the best information in the software so that you have the power to trade with confidence. Whether or not you're using VantagePoint or using a different platform, make sure that you're evaluating things like support and resistance, the institutional, that big money movement, as well as the timing of a trend. Give yourself the power of VantagePoint. If you haven't already, by using the predictive technical analysis. Again, if you need more information on that, just go ahead and go to that VantagePointForecast.com that we have dropped in the chat. Now, please don't forget to like and share so that we can share more additional education with you throughout the weeks. And we will see you all on the next session. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks so much.